The night Saoirse Wren signed the divorce papers, it was raining. Not the kind of dramatic movie rain that floods the streets and drowns out everything else. Just a thin, miserable drizzle that blurred the city lights outside the 32nd floor window, while her husband of 7 years sat across the conference table from her. Not even their kitchen table, a conference table, because this was how Declan Wren ended things, flanked by 2 attorneys, and wearing the same expression he wore when closing a bad acquisition deal. Disappointed, faintly impatient, already mentally somewhere else. She signed on the line her own lawyer pointed to. Her hand didn't shake. She remembered being vaguely proud of that. What she didn't notice, what no one at that table mentioned, was the 3rd addendum clipped behind the asset division pages. Her attorney's eyes had skimmed over it. Oversight, she would say later. I thought it was a standard residency clause. But it wasn't. Buried in the legal language was a waiver. A quiet, devastating little paragraph that would come back like a blade 9 months later. Saoirse didn't know about the paragraph that night. She gathered her coat, walked to the elevator alone, and stood in the parking garage for 4 minutes before she remembered she had driven herself. She had not cried yet. She would not cry for another 6 days. The marriage had been dissolving for longer than she wanted to admit. Maybe 2 years, maybe more. The way things dissolve slowly, and then all at once, like paper left in standing water. Declan had built Wren Capital from a mid-size real estate firm into something that appeared in financial magazines, and somewhere in the architecture of that success, Saoirse had become a fixture rather than a partner. She attended the dinners. She learned the names of board members' wives. She managed their home in Georgetown with the competence of someone who had quietly redirected an entire professional ambition into a supporting role she had never auditioned for. She had been a structural engineer before she married him. She had once calculated load tolerances for a pedestrian bridge in Baltimore. By the time Declan asked her to sign the papers, she hadn't opened a set of blueprints in 4 years. The woman he left her for was named Paige Sutton, 29, junior partner at the law firm that represented Wren Capital. The irony of that, the absolute geometry of it, was not lost on Saoirse. He had left her for someone his company paid. She found out the way people find out these things now. A photograph, sent anonymously, of the 2 of them at a charity gala in November. Declan's hand at the small of Paige's back. A touch Saoirse recognized. She had once been the person that hand reached for. She showed him the photograph. He didn't deny it. That was almost worse. What she didn't tell anyone, what she kept sealed inside her for 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, was that she was pregnant. She had suspected it before the papers were signed. The nausea had started in late January, quiet and persistent, like background noise she kept trying to attribute to stress. But she had not taken the test until 3 days after she handed her ring back. And when the result appeared, she sat on the cold bathroom floor of the apartment she'd rented in DuPont Circle. Nothing like the Georgetown house. Deliberately nothing like it. And she pressed both hands flat against the tile and breathed. Twins, the ultrasound technician told her at 8 weeks. 2 heartbeats, strong and steady, like they had already decided to stay. Saoirse did not call Declan. She knew in the particular clarity that comes only after a period of tremendous pain that she did not want him in this. Not after how he had looked at her across that conference table. Not after the photograph. Not after 7 years of being slowly erased. These were her children. She would build something for them from whatever she had left. She had her severance, her share of the joint assets the divorce settlement had outlined. She had her engineering license, lapsed but renewable. She had a sister in Philadelphia named Rowan who drove down the same night, Saoirse finally told someone, arriving at 11:30 with soup and the kind of presence that doesn't require explanation. Tell me what you need, Rowan said. I don't know yet, Saoirse said, but I think I'm figuring it out. She renewed her license in March. She reached out to a former colleague, a woman named Sylvie who had left a firm in D.C. to start her own structural consultancy in Philadelphia. They had worked together on the Baltimore Bridge. Sylvie remembered her immediately. I always thought you'd gone quiet, not gone, she said. Come in, let's talk. Saoirse went in. They talked. By April, she was doing contract review work from her apartment, seated at a drafting table she'd ordered online, and assembled herself, her back aching by the 3rd month of pregnancy, and her mind, for the first time in years, actually running at the speed it was built for. She did not think about Declan every day. This surprised her. Some weeks she barely thought about him at all, and then she would catch something. A particular restaurant they had gone to, a song on the radio, the way afternoon light fell through a certain kind of window, and the grief would arrive freshly, without warning. And she would give it a few minutes and then return to whatever she was doing. She was not over it. She was just not stopped by it. The man's name was Ellison Hart, and she met him at a hospital, not romantically. Nothing about it was romantic. She was 32 weeks pregnant, sitting in a chair in the corridor outside her OB's office, waiting for her appointment, when a man in a very good suit sat down across from her and proceeded to have what was clearly a terrible phone call while making no effort whatsoever to modulate his voice. "I don't care what the committee thinks," he said. "The timeline is wrong. They built the projection on assumptions that are 2 years old." A pause. "Then tell Reynolds I said so. I don't hold meetings to have people agree with me. I hold them to find what's broken." He hung up, looked at the phone for a moment, then looked up and found Sue watching him with the particular expression of a woman who has been trying to read the same page of a book for the past 4 minutes. "Sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I forget where I am sometimes. Cardiology or OB?" she asked. He blinked. "What? You're here for cardiology or OB? I'm trying to figure out if you're very stressed or very expectant." A pause, and then something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but the predecessor to one. "Neither. I'm visiting someone. 3rd floor. I took the wrong elevator." "The wrong elevator," she repeated. "I said I forget where I am sometimes." He glanced at her, then at the drafting printout she'd been holding. "What are you looking at?" "Load calculations for a footbridge in Falls Church. The contractor made an error in the foundation spacing. I've been trying to figure out how to explain this to him without being condescending. Is that possible? Probably not." He smiled then, fully. It changed his face considerably. His name, she would find out later, was Ellison Hart. His company, Hart Infrastructure Partners, had quietly become one of the largest private infrastructure investment groups in the Mid-Atlantic over the past decade. He was 41. He had visited the hospital that afternoon because his former mentor, a retired civil engineer named Gerald Oakes, was recovering from a cardiac event on the 3rd floor. He did not tell her any of this in the hallway. He just asked what kind of bridge, and they talked about structural tolerances until the nurse called her name. "The contractor will understand if you show him the numbers," Ellison said as she stood. "People who work with their hands respect precision." She looked at him for a moment. "That's actually correct." "I'm occasionally correct," he said. She went in for her appointment. She did not expect to see him again. She saw him again 3 weeks later at a project review meeting Sylvie had brought her into, a pedestrian corridor project in Arlington that Hart Infrastructure had co-funded. He walked into the conference room, stopped when he saw her, and said, "The footbridge. The fridge." "The footbridge," she confirmed. He sat down across the table from her and did not try to make it into anything other than what it was, which was professional, and she was grateful for that. They worked well together. He asked sharp questions. He didn't talk over the engineers. After the meeting, he held the elevator. "How's the Falls Church Bridge?" he said. "Contractor found the error himself in the end. Came to me slightly embarrassed. You let him find it?" "I sent him the numbers in a format he could follow." Ellison looked at her steadily. "That's better than condescending." "That was the goal," she said. He asked if she wanted coffee. She said she didn't drink coffee in the 3rd trimester. He said he knew a place with very good tea. They walked 4 blocks in the March cold and sat across from each other at a small table near the window, and he asked about the work she had done before, and she told him about the Baltimore Bridge and about the 4 years she had spent not being an engineer, and he listened the way certain people listen, as if what you are saying is actually the thing he is interested in, not a prelude to something he wants to say. She did not tell him about Declan that day. She told him 6 weeks later, over the phone, when he called to follow up on a contract question, and she was in the middle of a particularly bad night. The kind of night where everything she had not dealt with chose to arrive at once, and he heard something in her voice and asked, simply, "What happened?" She told him. Not all of it. Enough. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry that was done to you." Not "I'm sorry that happened. That was done to you." The construction of it mattered somehow. She noticed it. "I'm fine," she said. "Most of the time." "That's usually true," he said. "Most of the time is enough to build on." She gave birth on a Wednesday in May. Twin girls, both healthy, both furious about being in the world, born 11 minutes apart. She named them Isadora and Ren. The Ren was for herself, not for Declan, a reclamation she had decided on quietly at 4 in the morning sometime in April. Rowan was there. Sylvie had sent flowers. Ellison texted at some point after midnight, "Rooting for all three of you." She did not hear from Declan until the third day. He showed up at the hospital. Not the maternity ward. Security stopped him at the desk and left a message with the floor nurse saying he wanted to speak with her. Source, sitting in the adjustable bed with one daughter asleep against her chest and the other in a bassinet 2 feet away, read the message and felt something settle in her, cold and certain. She had not told him. She had not told anyone connected to him. She did not know how he knew. She found out later it was a mutual acquaintance. Someone from a Georgetown dinner party who had seen her at Whole Foods in February and put it together. But the how mattered less than the fact. He knew, and he was here. She called her attorney. What came next was not fast, and it was not clean, but it was thorough. Declan's attorney sent a formal notification of paternity claim in the second week of June. Source's attorney, a methodical woman named Carol Eames, who operated with the energy of someone who had seen every version of this particular play, looked at the filing, looked at the addendum in the divorce paperwork, and looked at Source across the desk with an expression of careful precision. "The waiver," Carol said. "Did you read it before you signed?" "No," Sear said. "I was told it was a residency clause." "Did your previous attorney tell you that specifically?" she said. She pointed to the pages and said it was standard. I trusted her. Carol looked at the document for a long time. "This waiver, as drafted, would bar you from pursuing him for child support or custody claims. But there are 2 significant problems with it. The first is that it references children of the marriage, and the twins were conceived and born after the divorce was finalized. And the second? The second is that your previous attorney almost certainly had a duty to explain this clause specifically, and failed to do so. That is a separate legal issue." She set the papers down. "What he signed, or more accurately, what Wren Capital's attorneys slipped into your divorce agreement, may be equally problematic for him. Because if that addendum was drafted and inserted without your attorney's explicit notification, it may not be enforceable." Source absorbed this. "He came to the hospital, I know. He left a message with a nurse, I know that too." Carol folded her hands. "Let me be very clear with you. He has no legal right to those girls right now. The addendum is under review, and if he attempts to access them in any capacity without your consent before this is resolved, that is a matter for a different kind of conversation." Declan's attorneys filed again in July. This time it was a full custody claim, citing biological paternity and challenging the enforceability of the waiver clause, which now, seen from his side of the table, he apparently also found convenient to dispute, having presumably realized it could cut both ways. What Source's legal team filed in response was quiet and devastating in the way that accurate information tends to be. The addendum had been drafted by Paige Sutton's firm, the same firm that had represented Wren Capital. The conflict of interest was not subtle once someone looked for it, and Carol Eames had looked. The investigation into the addendum's origins took 11 weeks. What it uncovered was that the clause had been inserted at the instruction of someone at Wren Capital's legal team, and that Paige Sutton, now operating as Declan's personal attorney on the matter, had not disclosed her role in the original document's drafting. The Bar Association received a formal complaint in September. Declan's custody filing collapsed by October. Source learned this on a Tuesday morning. Carol called her, while Isadora and Wren were asleep in their respective bouncers, which Rowan had given her, and which had approximately 8 different sounds, 3 of which actually worked. She listened to Carol explain the outcome, thanked her, and sat in her kitchen for a while afterward doing nothing in particular. Ellison called that evening. She had told him some of it, not all of it, but enough that he had been checking in steadily in the background in the way he did things. Not intrusive, present. "I heard it went well," he said. "Carol called you?" Circe asked. "Carol called Sylvie. Sylvie called me. I am the last person in this chain to know anything which seems appropriate." She laughed. It surprised her. It's over. For now. For now is usually enough, he said. And she recognized the echo of something he had said to her once before, and she thought, he remembers. He's going to appeal, she said. Probably. I'm going to be okay either way. I know, he said. I've known that for a while. There was a silence that didn't need filling. Outside, the city was doing what cities do. Moving, loudly, without regard for what was happening inside any particular apartment. Isadora made a sound in her bouncer, something between a complaint and an experiment. Wren opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling, with the intense philosophical focus that babies bring to ordinary surfaces, and closed them again. Saoirse stood and went to check on them. Both fine. Both entirely unaware of the paperwork that had been fighting over their existence for months. Both just here, in the particular demanding way of people who have not yet learned to pretend they need less than they do. She thought about the conference table in the rain. The page she had signed, without reading to the bottom. The 4 years of blueprints she had not opened. She thought about her hand not shaking. It hadn't shaken then because she was holding herself too tightly to let anything escape. She didn't need to do that anymore. In the weeks that followed, she took on 2 new projects through Sylvie's firm, both of them involving heart infrastructure in some capacity, because that was the nature of infrastructure work in the mid-Atlantic. The same serious people kept appearing at the same serious tables. Ellison was at the review meetings. They disagreed about specification timelines with the specific energy of 2 people who respect each other's methodology enough to argue about it properly. After one meeting, he walked with her to the parking garage and said, "I'd like to take you to dinner, not as a project thing." She looked at him. "I have twins, I know. I'm not asking the twins. I'm asking you. They need a babysitter." "Rowan," he said immediately. She stared at him. "Did you call my sister? I asked Sylvie if you had anyone." Sylvie said Rowan. "I'm not going to apologize for gathering information before asking a question I wasn't certain about." She stood there in the parking garage, under the fluorescent lights, thinking about the load-bearing capacity of things. Bridges. Commitments. The particular tensile strength of something built slowly, from sound materials, by people who understand what failure looks like and have decided to build anyway. "Thursday," she said. "Rowan's free on Thursdays." He smiled, not the polished version, the real one. She drove home with the windows down even though it was October, because she wanted to feel the cold, and because wanting to feel things, even uncomfortable things, even cold things, was still new enough to notice. Isadora and Wren were asleep when she got home. Rowan folded into the couch with her phone, the apartment warm and lamplit, and full of the particular noise of small people breathing. She stood in the doorway of the girl's room for a moment, 2 small faces, 2 of her own, built during the hardest year of her life, and here, entirely here, asking nothing of her except what she already knew how to give. She had signed on the line that night in the rain, and her hand had not shaken, and she had walked out alone, and none of that had been the end of anything. Not really. It had just been the moment before she started building something only she could design.